Welcome to the Learn to Judge Beer livestream. Pour yourself a beer and join in as we cover everything from assessing and scoring beer through to identifying and fixing faults.
Welcome back, it's Beer School. How's everyone doing this week? Have you all got your Erdinger? I hope so, because that's what we're doing tonight. It's a 10A Weissbier, and if you look down below the video in the description, you can find the link to the BJCP style for it. As always, let me please introduce my co-host, Rich Keller.
Hi everyone.
How are you doing this week, Rich?
Not too bad, not too bad. Children, they're all off school, so it's been running around like a lunatic again.
Sounds busy.
Yeah.
Sounds busy. So, we're going to get into the beer a lot quicker this week. We've only got two things really to talk about before we get into it. The first one is that if you want to stand any chance of passing the exams, either the online entrance exam or especially the beer tasting exam, you need to spend time with the style guide on your own. It's no good going into the tasting exam where you'll get given a beer and be told, judge this as a 10A Weissbier, if you haven't got a clue what that style is and what beers in that style should include. So spend some time with the style guides. If you're just sitting down in the evening quietly having a beer, look it up in the style guide, go through it, make some notes for yourself, and it'll stand you in good stead if you want to sit the exams. The other thing I wanted to talk about was scoring strategies or methodologies that most judges use when they're filling in the score sheet. And this is relevant for us when we're scoring beers tonight, when you're sitting the exams or when you're judging in a competition. We've previously talked about the score sheet and how down the bottom here you've got these different scoring ranges listed where you might have a world-class example of the style, and well done to anyone who's scored that in a competition. You've done really well. And looking at these, you get some idea where a beer should sit. When you're judging a beer, you'll try it and you'll think, this is very good or not so good. And the way judges assign points varies. Some of them work from a bottom up. They decide roughly where they want the beer to fit. So if it's outstanding, they might think, yeah, it's going to be probably about a 45, and then work down the sheet, making the scores add up to that. That's the one methodology. The other that a lot of people do is top down. Well, they'll just go through, score everything independently, and then see where the score comes to at the end, and then work out if it fits in this area here. If they've scored everything and it comes to 45, but they're thinking, actually, this is only very good, there are a couple of things, they might knock some of the points down further up the page just to make it equal that. The other one's a hybrid approach where you kind of do a bit of both, and you're like, with just 5 points to play with on mouthfeel, for instance, and 3 points to play with on appearance, you might award them before you do anything else, and then use like flavour and overall impression to maybe balance it out to fit it into whichever category or grouping of scores you want it to fit in. I think that's my points covered on it. It was just a quick run through. Did you have any comments on that, Rich?
I think the main thing to add into that one is whatever the score you end up giving the beer, the description you've given needs to justify that or give enough reasons why you've given that score. I've seen a few score sheets where they've given you a very high score on the load of floors and vice versa. Just make sure that you're giving a score that's appropriate to what you're tasting, rather than just to match up with where you want the beer to end up.
Indeed. So yeah, make sure that always feedback, scoring, all equals one overall picture on the sheet. You want to tell a complete story that makes sense, not tell them things like, oh, this is very badly flawed, and then say, but yes, it's excellent. And it exemplifies the style well. There's no faults in it when it comes to the score.
Most often I've seen things like that. It's never by very far, is when one of the other judges has pointed something out after you filled in the score sheet. And you've had the discussion, you had different scores to start with, and you've adjusted to get closer together by discussing what you're tasting, and that discussion might get written down properly.
Cool. All right, so is everyone ready for a beer? What do we say? Should we get into the beer?
Oh,
all right.
Sarah's gone quiet.
I've gone quiet. I shouldn't have gone quiet.
I think we've got you on mute, Sarah.
1 sec. Ah, yeah. For some reason, Zoom muted me on that computer. This one was still going out. That's why I was confused. I'm looking at these lines going up and down, telling me there's noise, and you saying I've gone quiet.
Yeah.
Right, beer time. Let's get into it, shall we? I keep forgetting I've got this camera locked off on focus, so I can't hold the beer that close and expect it to focus. Alright, let's get the nose in. Quick flyby and get some first impressions. Okay, let's see folks in the chat, please, down below or over on the side or wherever it is on your device. And let's see what people are getting from the aroma on this. The things we're looking for are moderate to strong phenols, usually a clove, fruity esters, which are typically banana. The balance and intensity of the phenols and ester components can vary, but they're normally should be balanced and prominent. Hop character low to none. A light to moderate wheat aroma, which can be perceived as bready or grainy. Other malt characteristics should not. So who's getting any of that so far? Appropriate cap size, what the, says Stu H.
Not sure what that's in reference to.
Whether he's got it in a different packaging to us, I don't know. Banana sponge with allspice.
Yeah, I quite like that. That's
yeah. So back to like the foam banana type thing. Is that what you mean when you say banana sponge, or as in banana cake? Eugene's getting wheat, no hop aroma. I can agree with that. I'm not getting any hop on this. Plenty of banana from Steve. And banana esters from Alan. Yeah, definitely some of it going on. Anyone getting anything spicy, anything maybe clove or peppery from it, from the fennel side?
Yeah, I'd like the call out from Richard there to go a bit more specific on the grain to go to white bread or white bread crust. It's always good to go a little bit more specific than just wheat or grain, though they're both good things to start with.
Definitely.
No.
So what else have we got? Sorry, I'm having to do one camera view tonight. The tech's gone a bit funny and I can't put 2 or 3 things on the screen at once. And I wasn't going to try and solve it with 2 minutes left before going live. Okay, so that's a good one from Dan. He's called out light sulfur. Someone else has called it out already, I'm guessing, the way he said I was getting it as well. Mm-hmm. Good one from Matt Ellis there. Small bit of wheat, some banana, and possibly to me a bit floral hops, but perhaps me misspelling the Miss-smelling, not misspelling, the spice. That would be quite a misspell to go from spice to floral. Mind you, anything's possible by the time you're judging your 30th beer of the day.
Yes, Matt mentions not vinegar, but something like that. I do get a little bit of what I think is yogurty lactic acid occasionally in the aroma of this. Like that. I mean, it probably isn't, but it is a little bit like it's got a touch of lactic acid in it. Is anyone getting any other fruits apart from banana?
Tom's getting very specific on the bread type there. He's going for Mother's Pride. That's actually a brand I haven't heard of or seen in a very long time. Is it still a thing? Is it? I don't know. Oh, compliment from Dan Waters on your Teku glass there, Tertiary.
Yeah, they're fake Teku glasses, but they're the same style. They're not the expensive ones.
Yeah, it's really not worth using expensive ones, is it? Yeah. I mean, I've had several sets of the Spiegelau glasses, and they're absolutely lovely for drinking from, but they are a little bit thin. So whilst
my family broke that set last one of those, so these are the replacements.
Yeah, I mean, I've just bought a set of 6 basic style glasses off Amazon, and they do me lovely for practically everything now. Right, so we've got pear is from Robert, which is, yeah, maybe a little there. It's not as prominent to me as the banana, but there's certainly some sort of pom fruit going on there for me. Are you getting that as well, Rich?
Yeah, there's a little bit. I tend to go to strawberry a bit on this. Maybe, it's in the script. They usually go to bubblegum, which is fake strawberry, but I think there's a more sort of like the small strawberries, the really intense ones.
That's actually really interesting comment, and I hadn't noticed it until you said it, but as soon as you say it, it's like, yeah, I can see strawberry. I can picture it from the flavours. Yeah, definitely. So Reese has made a schoolboy error. His Erdinger Weiss is a Franziskaner. I can never pronounce that Weiss. Supermarket mix-up. So drink along. It's probably similar enough, in all honesty, Reese. It's probably similar enough.
You could call out them with just saying it's a different beer each time, or just flagging it's a different beer, just to see what you get in contrast.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the other good thing with these sessions, whilst I put a suggested beer to get and hope that it's easy enough for everyone to get, it doesn't mean that you can't drink any beer you can get of that style and play along with us. So, I mean, if there's a week where you can't get the specific beer I say, for instance, I've added one to the end of the list now, which is going to be the Thornbridge, Jamestown, New England. So if you can't get that particular one, get whatever New England you can, and we'll compare notes. Mm-hmm. Okay, we've covered most of the aroma compounds. Anything else you think we ought to call out on it that we've missed so far, Rich?
I think we've pretty much covered most of it. I like the call from Stu about pear drops. That's quite an interesting one.
Yeah.
Occasionally. But yeah, the comment from Markers UK, the glass is the wrong shape, but the classic Weissbier glass is really tall. So you can pour with a massive head on it. It's one of those very specific glasses for this style. Yeah,
very much so. To be honest, as long as especially for this one, even something like the old Nonic is probably more similar to a traditional Weiss glass than this.
Yeah, but as we mentioned one of the previous ones, the glasses we use for beer tasting can be quite a variety. They're usually fairly small, but we used to use IKEA's £1 for a box of 6 very little tumblers for a long time, and they work fine. It doesn't need to be anything fancy.
Certainly not. And I've judged at several competitions in the past, including years and years ago, the UK National, where it was out of plastic tumblers. The glass is not everything. They can help, but you can still get a lot from any type of glass, honestly.
Mostly it's consistency. If you're tasting beers in radically different glasses, that doesn't really work very well. But if they're all the same or same-ish, that's fine.
Interesting one from Alan there. I'm getting a touch of medicated wintergreen now. Odd. Now, this is one flavour I've not tried, so I can't comment on whether I'm getting the same thing. Have you had wintergreen? Any ideas from you on that one, Rich?
No, it's an unfamiliar one to me.
Because
Alan, describe it a bit more. Are there any other terms to describe it?
Yeah, this comes back to something I said on, I think, the first session, which was whenever you get the chance to try something new, try it. Even if you don't like it, you can build a mental image and come back to that later on when you're describing other things. So that's certainly one I'd like to try myself in future, is wintergreen, and see how it goes.
A quick Google says strong minty odour and flavour. Interesting.
Okay. Right, so let's get to scoring then. So for aroma, you have... Where are we? Aroma, you've got 12 points to award. Based on the descriptions that everyone's getting, where do you think this beer fits? Are we talking a world-class example at 12? Is there something you think it's missing? Or something you think it has that it shouldn't, to reduce that score some? Alan says methyl salicylate. Germaline.
Germaline. Okay, so that's more heading towards chlorophenols in that case.
Yeah, it does sound like it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I would not say that. Okay.
Okay.
We'll have to see what people think for the score then. I might be getting a bit of lag here. I'm not seeing any coming up yet. But then again, I've not seen anything since Alan's comments about wintergreen come up on that system.
That's an 11 from Stu. Yeah, more spice and pepper.
Yeah, thanks Dan for posting the style guide again. That's very helpful. Talking of style guide, etc., in the description underneath, you'll see there's a link to the BJCP membership guide. If you're wanting to sit the entrance exam, you will have to read that one. Quite a few of the questions can be on things like what you have to do to achieve different ranks. So that's one to bear in mind. And also there's a link down there to the judge's procedure manual, questions on which will be in the online entrance exam.
Yeah, there's usually quite a chunk of questions on how to run competitions, though a lot of them are pretty obvious. Like, can the person organising the competition also be a judge if they are completely blind to the beers? And basically, if you're blind to the beers, that's fine. If you know whose beer is which, no, fairly obvious. But yeah, it's definitely worth reading through both of those and being aware of how it works.
Okay, so we're getting a 10 to 11 from Steve, 11 from Stu. David says he's got the Erdinger Weiss, which is fair, more spice and banana. Interesting, I've not tried that one. I might have to look that one up. Matt says 10, an 8 from Rob. Mine has a bit of age, I think. Low esters and phenol compared to the fresh keg of Heifer. Okay, so we seem to... There's a couple of 9s or 9 to 10 just come in. What was that from Jay then? 9 sweet ester notes, banana and clove, not much spice, but all seem a bit subdued or muted. So yeah, That's good reasons for reducing points.
The level on both phenols and fruit esters in the description is medium to strong. I'd probably expect one of them to be stronger, but they can both be medium, which is not like punch you in the face, but it should definitely be there.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say if you're 9 to 10, you're in about the right ballpark for this one for what I'll be putting down for it. Again, I will be blatantly honest with you. I'm not the highest ranking judge in the country. You're probably not even in the room. But that's just my experience, and I'll be looking about 9 to 10 for this one. How about you, Rich?
Yeah, I think I'd end up on a 10 probably for this. I think I agree slightly with the people commenting that it's all a little bit subdued. And then that hint of yogurtiness is a bit weird. But only they're fractional flaws, hence only a couple of points.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. So yeah, everyone's saying 9 to 10. Great. If you've got because we're dealing with commercial beers, they've all been on the shelf different lengths of times. They've all travelled differently. You might have one that's been on the shelf at a small branch for months. Someone else might have one that's literally just arrived in the country. So there will be some variation. I'd say if you're in that 9 to 11 range, well done, you're in the right place.
But if you're not, it may just be, as we say, you've got a bottle that's been sat on a hot supermarket shelf for a couple of months.
Yeah. Jack Barber's just asked, what temp is recommended? I generally try to go for about 11 to 12 degrees C and just try and be consistent about that. But if you go too cold, you'll find it much harder to get aromas and flavours out of the beer. If you go too warm, it's a lot less pleasant. What's your normal temperature to go for, Rich?
I always start a little bit colder, but then it's much easier to warm a beer up than it is to cool it down. So I tend to store them at about 8. And then you can just hold the glass like that if you think it's a bit cold and just get some of your body heat into it. So, yeah, for tasting, it probably ends up at about the same temperature. I just start a little bit cooler.
Yeah, I mean, my beer fridge is set to 9 because I end up getting them out about 5-10 minutes before we go live. So it's had a little chance to warm up before I open them. Again, there's no necessarily right or wrong answer. Just try and be consistent across beers. I've been at competitions where we've judged them at near freezing ambient temperatures because there was snow on the ground. And I've been in competitions where it's been the middle of summer and we're in a room with very little ventilation. So we've judged beers at a range of temperatures from about 2 degrees up to about 24 degrees, I'd say.
They're all the same. You're judging like against like, and you bear the temperature in mind. And obviously different temperatures work with different styles. A really cold British bitter is not very nice, but a really hot lager is also not very nice.
Indeed. Right, shall we move on to the appearance then? It's been about a while. I have topped up again, and the things we're looking for in appearance for this style is on camera 4. Right, pale straw to rich gold in colour. A thick, moussey, long-lasting white head is characteristic. The high protein content of wheat implies the clarity in an unfiltered beer, although the level of haze is somewhat variable. Who thinks that's what we've got here? So, I certainly did have a very thick, moussey textured, long-lasting white head on it. It's faded quite a bit now because the bottle's been open quite some time. What do people think of the colour? I always struggle with the colour. I could look at it and go, well, that's about that EBC, but you don't write EBC on the appearance section. You try and give it a named colour. And that's what I'd love to see with... Have you got your BJCP colour card with you?
Yeah, I've got the colour chart.
What I'd love to see is that, but instead of having the numbers on it, they just said, this is straw, this is gold, this is light gold. And then we all had a very standard agreement of what each colour meant. Okay, Duncan's head disappeared very quickly. Sometimes head especially can be dependent on how brilliantly clean the glassware is. If you've got a head that drops quickly, sometimes you can just spin the glass and see how quickly it comes back. If you can rouse it quickly, that's normally a good indicator that the beer would have a good head on it, but perhaps the glassware isn't immaculately clean. We did mention this in an earlier stream. Sometimes you'll see people with glasses where it's just all bubbles stuck to the side, tiny little bubbles. That's also an indicator that the glass isn't beer clean. Right, so let's see some more comments we've got. Steve agrees with most of that. I guess that was the appearance. Tom says it's towards the darker end of the spectrum. Definitely a darker gold for his. Lightly based, impressive and an energetic head on the pour. Yeah, it certainly did have that.
I think the colour can go a little bit darker than my example. Because I think from the stats it's 6 SRM, which is well fairly pale. It's still a little touch darker.
Yeah.
The other thing that it's equally hard to do descriptors for to colour is the head. Once again, you have a set of colours. We've had white is fairly obvious for beers, but then you get into sort of cream, ivory. There's a couple more you can do. That slipped my mind.
Off white.
Stout.
Yeah.
And then you're looking at the size of the bubbles and the consistency of the size, and whether it fades down to a ring around the outside of the glass or to a film across the top. There's a whole load of words around that you can try, and load of description you can put in there. But you always have to be aware that, you're going through flights of beer. People have been washing these glasses quite a lot. They mightn't be as perfectly clean, so it's always worth swirling it back up again, as Sarah said.
Yeah, so just for a reminder, the things we're looking for on appearance, as well as the colour of the beer.
Good descriptions coming in here for the head. So we have moosey white head from Matt.
Yeah.
Pillowy, another good descriptor.
So yeah, Matt on pouring a thick moosey white head. Perhaps not completely clear, but a lovely light gold. Yeah, for a normal Weissbier, as opposed to a crystal Weiss or a filtered Weiss.
Steve mentions nice tight head. I assume tight, you're referring to small bubbles, sort of type of head. I think that's how I'd usually use that.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of good descriptors coming in. The things we're looking for is colour, clarity, and the head retention, colour and texture. And I think nearly everyone's covered those in their comments. So let's move on then and score the appearance. Out of 3, bearing in mind that your example may not be exactly the same as what we're looking at, what would you score the Erdinger Weissbier for appearance? At this rate, I'm going to run out. I'll have to crack the second bottle. So, any scores? I may be a bit lagged again here. A 3 from Eugene. I'm not going to say anything just yet, either way, because I don't want to influence anyone. And again, I just want to flag up that we have actually got a lot of experienced and qualified judges in the chat using this as what's the word I'm looking for? Revision. That's it. They were using this as revision. So see what's going on in the chat. See if you agree with it. If there's something you think isn't quite right and you want to deduct points, just say why you feel that. There's no one saying that you're wrong, because as I always say to anyone I'm judging with, and get paired up with judges of all abilities. One flight you might be judging with a national or a master, the next you might be judging with someone who's not sat an exam, who's just a novice or an apprentice judge. And what can happen is, I always say, people are sensitive to different things. People may detect something that I don't. I may detect something that they can't. It doesn't mean they're wrong, and they should always put what they get, not what I get. So, yeah, we've mainly on 3s. Stu's said 2, more brightness would have made a 3. I'm guessing that perhaps his one has stirred up a lot of yeast, perhaps, because this one is allowed. Its level of haze is somewhat variable, so it doesn't say how cloudy it can be, but generally some level of cloudiness is expected. But yeah, 2, 3 sounds great to me. I don't think Rich would disagree.
That sounds about right. It will be a 3 for me. It's one of those styles of beer where cloudiness is required, really.
Yeah. Yeah, if it's too clear, then it's actually out of style, if anything. The idea of the Weissbier is that it is an unfiltered one, so it should have protein left in suspension. It shouldn't be the filtered version. Right, flavour. Now, most of us have probably been drinking already, but also drinking to try breathing back out again for the aroma. But now we're going to look just at the flavour. Low to moderately strong banana and clove flavour. Balance and intensity of the phenol and ester components can vary, but the best examples are reasonably balanced and fairly prominent, so similar to the aroma. Optionally, a very light to moderate vanilla or faint bubblegum notes can accentuate the banana. Sweetness and roundness. Neither should be dominant if present. So they're very similar to the aroma. Then we're talking about the bready, grainy flavour of wheat, and it has to be complementary. So it shouldn't be overpowering. Slightly grainy sweet malt character. Low to no hops, and hop bitterness is very low to moderately low. So how are people finding this beer? Are they finding it really tasty? Are they finding it very bitter? What's people's impressions here? How's it finishing for you, and what's the aftertaste like? So just as a reminder, the things we're looking for on flavour, and if you're going to sit one of the exams, you should be commenting on everything that's mentioned here, which should be the malt, the hops, the fermentation characteristics, the balance, the finish aftertaste, and any other flavour characteristics. So a complete description will contain a comment on all of those things, even if it just says no hop flavour detected. If you don't mention hops at all, then you will get knocked as an incomplete description. So let's have a look.
So we've got from Tom balanced flavours of banana and cloves with vanilla. I like the light honey sweetness. I think that's a nice touch.
Yeah.
There's definitely a certain sweetness in the finish of this beer.
Yeah, I think the sweetness is a bit more pronounced in the finish than it is up front, definitely. But it is certainly there, and it lasts quite a bit after you've finished your mouthful. White bread, definitely well balanced and rounded across the flavours. There we go, it's come up in that system now, so I can put it up on the screen. So from Matt, we have nothing overpowering, no bitterness, not too sweet, well balanced, a hint of bitterness in the aftertaste. Yeah, yeah. The bitterness is definitely a bit more pronounced in the finish, definitely. Letterbox Workshop says a clean finish with a caramel dryness in the aftertaste.
Caramel and dryness is an interesting mix of words. You can add descriptors to the aftertaste, like you say the bitterness lingers, but is it a herbal, a sweet? And you can do all sorts of descriptors in there. We have the foam banana sweets up again, which I think I probably mentioned previously is exactly the same chemical as the banana. In Weissbier, it's the same as in the foam banana sweets. It's the same chemical.
Yeah, sweet banana like the shrimp and banana sweets. No hot bitterness. An interesting finish. Cooling mouthfeel like after-sink menthol or mint. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. The one thing I would say, Jay, there is an interesting finish is great for a section like overall impression, maybe, rather than it being a descriptor for the flavour. Interesting doesn't really help build a mental impression of how the beer tastes. So whilst it does perfectly describe the beer, it is a good description of it. It doesn't really describe what the flavour is. So if it was for an exam, I'd avoid using phrases like interesting or good or nice for the descriptor sections.
Yeah, what you're trying to do with those descriptors is what you're sensing and the level at which you're sensing it. It can lead to some slightly forced language at times, where you have sort of low this, low that, low the other, or low, medium, high. But you can use other words like moderate or similar ones, just to try and make it a bit more like English and less like a sort of bullet point list.
Yeah, they can get a bit repetitive at times, can't it?
Yeah.
It feels like you're just... Sometimes it can feel you've taken what you've said in the aroma section and copying half of it down to the flavour section.
Yeah, for an exam, I probably would copy it down. If you're doing a score sheet in the competition, you can say flavour follows aroma with these differences. That usually saves you a few minutes of just writing the same thing down.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. It's expected that everything will be fully filled in for the exam. When you are judging in a competition, the time pressure, if anything, is even more intense. You haven't got 6 beers to get through in an hour and a half. You've got like 10 beers to get through in an hour and a half. So some shortcuts like just saying, flavours like the aroma is acceptable, but you should still describe the beer.
Yeah, absolutely. You should have some more than just that. That's the starting point for you to go and say more. The time pressure has got a lot less than it used to be in competitions because now we have more judges. We used to be trying to do 3 or even 4 flights in a day, but now we're more likely to do 2. Which is much more sensible.
Definitely. Okay, we've had a lot of different call-outs now on flavour. So bready flavours, closed there but muted. Again, bread's a great descriptor. It's always good to try and be a bit more specific. As Rich mentioned last week, is it the crust of the bread? Is it the doughiness of it? Is it dark cooked? Is it light? It's always nice to just try and build up by layering the descriptions together if possible.
Yeah.
And there's me saying that after just saying, yes, you are under time pressure. I know it's heard. I'll be totally honest with you. If anyone is considering sitting the exams, my experience may have been a little different than some other people's. I found the online exam quite easy. It's a lot of time pressure from memory, and this may have changed or I may remember it wrong, it was something like 200 questions, all multiple choice, and you had, I think it was an hour to do it. Yeah, Rich is nodding. So it was 200 questions in an hour, all multiple choice. So rush through it, tick all the boxes you're sure of, and then start coming back to the ones you weren't sure of after. If you've done time with the style guide, with the judging procedures manual and the membership guide, getting 60% if you use that sort of process isn't too difficult. But the worst thing you can possibly do is take your time doing every question in order and run out of time before you get to the end, because then you may have missed off the questions at the end.
Yeah, it's also open book, so you can look up the answers, but you have got nowhere near enough time to look up every single one. So it's worth just going through, as Sarah says, do the ones you can, and then come back and do the ones where you're going to have to look it up later. And there's a variety of questions in there. There are some multiple choice where you just pick one. There's some where you have to pick all that are true. And they do flip the questions around because they are fairly standard. But they pick the questions from a very long list of questions, but they swap them around to the not version of the question quite often. So be careful to read the question really carefully.
Dan's actually raised a good point there. He's now on his second bottle and the first pour of it, and the flavours are more muted than they were at the end of the last bottle. That is indeed quite possible. It could be some bottle variation, but especially with a beer that's unfiltered, you will get sediment that may get stirred up as you get further through the bottle, which can normally change the flavour quite a bit by the time you get to the bottom. Some people do like to take their wheat beers and disturb all the sediment before they pour it. Some don't. So if you've disturbed the sediment on purpose, then you get a lot more even distribution of flavour and aroma compounds throughout the first to the last pour.
I like to judge, you need the skill to wax lyrical. Yeah, I do tend to do that a bit. It doesn't need to be there. You just need to get the words that describe what you're experiencing. You don't have to be very wordy about it. It's just so that someone can imagine what you're tasting or experiencing.
Yeah, definitely. And the vocabulary we use tends to be fairly standardized, and you soon pick up on that as you do it. It's all a little bit alien to start with, and there's still part of me that goes, I've never known a single brewer who's entered a competition to find out if their phenols are moderately high or low. But that we do put a lot of emphasis on describing the beer properly. Okay, so scores for flavour, please. Scores on the doors. Let's see where everyone's coming on this one. Bearing in mind the things we're looking for, you have 20 points to award. If you're going under 18, it would be good to see something to say why. Tom says they did the written exam last year. Time pressure is real. Definitely, especially for the written exam. Tom, when you say the written, was that the full written one to go national? Some people refer to the tasting exam as a written exam, so just want to check. But yeah, with the written exam, which is one that you do if you want to go from certified, which is where I am and I think Rich is, up to national, we've got, I believe it's 2 in the country at the moment. Sam takes one. I can never remember who the other one is, so apologies to you. I will have to double check. But yeah, Sam Tate's one of our national judges. To become a national, you have to sit an extra exam, which is commonly referred to as the written exam, where you will have, I believe it's 3 essay questions to write out. And that comes from a possible pool of hundreds of different combinations of compare this beer, and this beer, or those sort of questions. So you really need to know your stuff if you're going to go for national.
Yeah, so just to be clear about the exams, the multiple choice one is open book, but you do not have enough time to look up all the answers. The tasting exam is closed book and proctored, and then the written exam is closed book again, but you have to write long answers. For those who have done the multiple choice exam recently, usually it's valid. You have to do a tasting exam within a year, but that period has been extended because obviously there haven't been very many tasting exams recently. So I think you've got at least another year on that, whenever you did it.
Yeah, they haven't. I don't think they've announced a cut-off date yet where they are putting the year back into circulation, and we're currently still at a point where normally if you're a BJCP judge and you haven't done anything at all for 2 years, then you just drop out of active status. If you then go ahead and judge something again, you become active again. So it's not a major thing. But currently that's also on hold. They're not retiring anyone from active status at the moment for time period.
The only thing that the inactive status thing does is it moves you off their mailing lists for anyone who's hunting for judges for a competition. So you stop getting spammed as much. Like people who want you to come and judge their beers for them, which is quite nice.
Yeah, especially in the UK, because sometimes we just find people spam the entire BJCP judge list and say, come judge this competition. It's in the middle of the States and you're not allowed to travel here anyway.
Yeah.
Right, so the scores on the doors, we're seeing 18s, 19s and 20s. We've got, 3 18s I'm seeing, 3 or 4 18s, 3 or 4 19s. Steve is saying 20 because he's got no reason to remove them. Alan's saying he's afraid he has to say 20. Don't be afraid about it. If you think it's a perfect example, award it the full points. That's what they're there for. Some of the hardest things are getting that confident enough in yourself that you can go, yes, this is a 48-point world-class example of this beer.
Yeah, it is very, very, very obvious that judges, as they get more experience, start spreading their scores out further. So when you start judging competitions, your scores tend to be fairly in the middle. But as you get more confident in what you're doing, you tend to move out and be much more willing to give very high scores and very low scores. Though handing out 50s is still pretty rare, because as soon as you do that, the next beer will be better.
Yeah, there's always that fear, isn't it? Especially at the very first couple of beers in a flight. Yeah. It's like, how high do I go? Because there's still another 8. There's going to be something better.
You can always come back to the first few again, and you often do come back to the first few if you suddenly realise that, I might have marked them a little bit low. Yeah,
that's what I do like, where we're seeing more mini bester shows now. It does give you the opportunity to revisit those beers and go, was this one really as good as I thought it was? Or was there really good as our, good? So it does balance things out when you do a mini bester show like that. I can't give a 20 because I've had better, says Keith Bailey. How can I put this now? You may have had better beers, and you may have had better of this particular style even, but was there any way that this beer failed to meet what was in the style guidelines? Because that should always be the guiding light for the score the beer's given. In the case of 2 points, I wouldn't worry too much. But if you were like going, well, I've had better, so I'm only going to give it a 13 or a 14 out of 20, then there should definitely be some sort of justification to say, I'm only giving it this because it doesn't hit these points in the style guideline. A lovely comment from Stu H there. The only way this beer could taste better is on tap on the Bavaria hillside. I don't know, I think out in a nice sunny garden would also improve it a bit. But yeah, I mean, for me, it meets most of the things there. I wouldn't say it was moderately strong banana and clove. I'd say it was a bit too restrained for that personally. I would say that the phenols aren't fairly prominent. I'd say that would imply a little bit more prominent for me. So I would probably be about 18 on this one as well. How about you, Rich?
I think I'm in about the same region, 17, 18-ish. I think it perhaps is a little sweet. Yeah, obviously the lack of any hop bitterness means there's a sensation of sweetness, but I think there's a little bit more than I'd expect. But it's a point or two there, and yeah, the banana and clove is a little bit low, but once again, fractional differences.
Cool. Right. What we need to do then is mouthfeel, and we'll move through this one fairly quickly because I think it's important that we spend time on the overall impression. The mouthfeel, you've got 5 points. So start telling me what you think this beer scores out of 5. It should be medium light to medium bodied, never heavy. Suspended yeast may increase the perception of body though. The texture of wheat imparts a sensation of a fluffy, creamy fullness that may progress to a light, spritzy finish, aided by a high to very high carbonation. This style is always effervescent. So if you ever have one of these or a beer entered into this style, which isn't really fizzy, then that is always a reason to deduct points in mouthfeel.
Yeah, this is a really good example of what a very high carbonation beer is like. And if you let it go flat, just leave a bit of it for a while, it gives you can see that the flavors and the experience of all the other categories change as the carbonation drops out of it.
Yeah, and that's a very good point for when you get beers entered that are perhaps lower carbonation than they should be. Seeing how that carbonation affects your perception of all the other characteristics of the beer is certainly worth bearing in mind when it comes to judging other beers. It could make the difference between a beer being totally out of style or in style but undercarbonated. And unfortunately, now and again, we do get the odd totally flat beer at competitions as well, which makes judging a bit more of a chore. Right, interesting. My second bottle is much brighter in colour. I wonder if the other cap was not seated properly. It's possible. It's not as likely with a commercial beer as it would be for a homebrew. But it is possible. Steve says 5 hits all the marks for him. So out of 5, mouthfeel for me, yeah, body's about right. It's not heavy, it's good. I haven't got much by way of suspended yeast in this glass. As you can see, it's pretty clear. So it's not getting that increased body. It's not really getting too much fluffiness, although there is a hint of it. Light spritzy finish, yeah, that's definitely there. Mm-hmm. For me, it's probably a 4 for mouthfeel, I think.
I think it ends up at 5 for me. Once again, it's worth mentioning when you're filling in this section in the exam, do the nose for the ones that are definitely not there. I think we mentioned it before, so in this case, no warmth or astringency. Yeah,
always a good one to call out. So that comes back to the things like, where are we? Camera 4, 3. So mouthfeel should be body, carbonation, warmth, creaminess, and if there's no creaminess, say no creaminess, astringency and any other palate sensations. Fives, fours, yeah.
Yeah.
Rich says 3, sweetness is too much edging on, cloying near the end of the glass, which is quite possible. I haven't managed to get to the end of the glass yet, so because I've been topping up, so I can't comment on that, but it is quite possible.
There's an interesting one there of how much of that belongs in mouthfeel and how much of it belongs in flavour. Acidity is the one that sort of bounces between the two a bit, where you actually call that out. I'd normally put sweetness in flavour rather than mouthfeel, because it is a flavour, basically. The cloying one's interesting. Whether that comes into body or not depends on what you're actually sensing.
Yeah, cloying would normally imply almost a syrupy thing. So yeah, that could well come under body and could be a very valid comment for that section. As Dan says, sweetness should be within flavour. I think everyone's 4 or 5 for that one. That's great. So let's do overall impression then, because this is an important one. It's 10 points up for grabs. So the sort of things we should be thinking about here is how much you've enjoyed drinking it and the feedback for the brewer for how to make it better. So what I normally do in this section is think about, did I enjoy it? Would I want to brew it myself? Would I like them to send me the recipe? Things like that. Give them some, if they brewed a great beer, let them know.
You're still trying to keep your personal preferences for style out of it.
Yeah.
If it's a great example of a style you hate, you still need to be positive about it here.
Yeah, and I'll be totally honest, that's difficult to do if it's a style you really, really don't like. For instance, I was one of the judges for a pairing of clubs competition, and one of the styles was Weissbier. And I personally detest smoked beers. But we still had a couple of really good Weissbiers, and they scored really well. And still, even with my personal preference against them, my scores were very similar to the other judges for them. So yeah, it's not always easy, and sometimes it does take experience to put your personal preferences for style aside. Normally, when you apply to judge at a competition, you can say, these are my favoured styles, and these are ones that I don't like judging. And if you haven't got Taz as a head judge, they might take that into consideration, but Taz does tend to ignore that section. He's quite open about that.
Yeah. So, what are people thinking for overall impression? What sort of things would you be talking about?
Nice comment from David. He hasn't met a beer he doesn't like yet. He hasn't had a smoked beer though. But have a bag of smoked malt for adding to stouts. Hopefully it's just the smoked one and not the peat smoked one. Otherwise you will know about it if you put it in there.
And also for the introduction to smoked beer, don't start with the classic style one. That's about as far the one.
Yeah, the Axlanker Mertzen, aka bacon beer.
Yeah.
Dan Waters is a Weissbier convert.
Yeah, I judged a couple of those in one of those inter-club competitions, and there's a restrained level. They're really nice.
Yeah. Okay, so Duncan's come in with a 6 on overall impression out of 10. It needs more clove. It's a bit too acidic for the style. The beer lacks impact overall. Hang on, it's gone off. And tastes like a sub 5% beer. So, what is it? Let's have a quick look. A 5.3%. So, yeah, the allowed range for the style goes from about 4.3 to about 5.6. So as long as it isn't very significantly under 5%, then it's still fine.
Yeah.
But it's always hard to gauge ABV. When you're talking 10% plus, you really know about it. But it's actually quite hard to tell the difference between a 4 and a 6, in my opinion. Other people may disagree.
Yeah, you could have a 6 that hides its alcohol really well, and a 4 that's just a bit hot, and the alcohol's very obvious. But yeah, as we've said before, you have no information about the beer when you're judging it, apart from the category it's being entered in. So it could be almost anything.
Yeah, Keith says it's a 7. It meets most of the guidelines, though a bit restrained with the esters and phenols. I prefer Weissbier young. I've no idea how old that is. And that's a very, very fair comment. What I would say in this section, be thinking about, rather than saying it's a bit restrained in esters, be thinking about what you can advise they do to improve it, to make it better beer of the style. For instance, consider increasing fermentation temperature to increase ester production. Things along those lines. But again, as we've mentioned in previous streams, we try not to assume process.
Yeah.
So whilst now and again I will write, consider mashing higher to get more fermentability, I'd also normally put an or and then whatever you'll do if it was extract, because I've no way of knowing if someone's brewed extract, they've brewed all grain, or for all I know they've gone and got a Cooper's kit off the shelf. So try and provide feedback that's useful however they've brewed the beer. So we're seeing 7s, 8s. You could tell that Duvel was 8 plus.
Well, no, day after you definitely could.
Yeah, especially for whoever it was who was on their 3rd bottle before we got to the end of the stream. Yeah, I bet they knew about it the next day as well. Steve says it's an 8 for me. Great banana wheat flavours, sweet enough without being OTT. Lovely gold colour. I would love to be able to make beer like this. It is a lovely style. It's a style that's not commonly seen about the country, apart from by homebrewers. You don't find too many commercial breweries over here putting them out, and you certainly don't find them that often in mainstream pubs.
Yeah,
So,
I suggest just give it a go. It does have a reputation of being a really fiddly mash, but you don't really have to do any of the complexities that are sometimes advised. Just a straight, normal, single infusion mash with the right ingredients in it, and some yeast, some wheat you don't need to gelatinize, and you're good to go. So torrefied or something like that works fine. It's the yeast that's a trick, and there's loads of those commercially available now.
yeah, definitely. This is certainly one of those styles where what they say is true, that the brewers make the wort and the yeast makes the beer. So Stuart says, or Stu, I assume Stuart, sorry if that wasn't the case, Stu. Trying to keep my bias out, I would brew this beer. I would like the recipe. It's a good example of the style. I'd recommend improving the spice with a longer amylase rest.
Yeah, this is the interesting thing about this style, is how you swing it from banana to clove and to and fro. There are a lot of theories how you do that, whether it's something you do in the mash, whether it's how you treat the ferment. It's not one I've brewed a lot of, so I don't consider myself qualified to comment on it, beyond saying there's a lot of opinions.
Yeah, very much so. For me, it's probably about an 8 in overall impression. It's got a couple of things that I would have liked to have seen different, slightly more pronounced phenols, because what's there doesn't feel appropriate for the amount that it says should be there, but it's not that far off. So what would you say for your overall impression score on this beer, Rich?
Yeah, I'm on an 8 as well. I think we're more or less in agreement. I would say a little bit more of either the banana or the clove, one way or the other. Just pick one and go with it. And then there's a little bit of residual sweetness in it. I think is slightly more than the description, but it's good. Otherwise, it wouldn't be on the classic examples list.
Yeah, and that's the other thing to bear in mind. It is there. It is down. I'll scroll down. It was there as a classic example, I thought. Although I can't. No, it's not.
No, it's not.
It was there in the 2008s then, I think.
It's interesting. It may be that as this is the volume that's being produced of this has gone up, it has become a bit more restrained and a bit more mass market. But I think it was there on the previous version.
Yeah, I think so as well. Okay, so thanks ever so much, everyone. I hope you found today interesting. If you're going to join us next week, I've put Guinness Original. If you can get Guinness Original, that's brilliant. If you can only get Guinness Draft, get that. I think I've still got some Guinness Draft in the fridge as well, so I'll have both here. The main difference between the two is that the draft is served on nitro, the original isn't. But it does make a difference. Dan Walters says, is it Imperial Stouts next week? There's a story there. Dan's told me he wants an Imperial Stout one. And the trouble is, I can certainly talk Imperial Stout. I love the style. But getting an example that's available across multiple supermarkets easily is not so easy. So, I mean, let me know what you think. Don't put it in chat because the chat will vanish after and I won't see it. If you can please comment on the video, it will be up live in about 5 minutes time and you can just put a comment underneath it. Let me know if you would like me to do a beer or a couple of beers that are not as easy to get hold of, but I honestly feel that you should try. Say, for instance, an Imperial Stout that you have to get either online or from a bottle shop rather than from Tesco's, Morrison's, Asda. Because that's what I've been looking at. I've been looking at Tesco's, Morrison's, Asda's. If it's in at least 2 of them, then I felt that the beer can be included in these sessions. But we're not going to find an Imperial Stout in those. Right, so yeah, Guinness Original next week. Thanks very much again to Rich. Once again, he's been wonderful.
Have fun.
And we'll see you all next week. Thanks for your time, folks.
Remember to hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks for watching Daft Cat Brewing.
That was fun.
Yeah, that was good.
It was fun, as always.